registered energy advisors. And as an individual that sees candidates calling and emailing and inquiring about the training, it's funny. Like, I have like this little thesis on and who and how someone should be onboarded, and this is just my own thesis on this. It just feels like people are calling in and they're interested, but at the same time they're cautious and they're worried. They don't know whether they don't know. They're interested because they're seeing that they could be a potential side gig to complement their primary, and at the same time, or they're already in complementary industries and they can add to it. I rarely run into people that say that I'm interested, I bought my blower door test, can't wait to be a full-time registered energy advisor. I'm like, okay, my friend, you're an anomaly. Welcome aboard. I rarely run into individuals like that. They've been in similar industries. They know of it. They like what they hear. Their buddies is doing it. They want to also do it. And they're still kind of treading carefully, and they're willing to make that commitment. And then, so that's kind of like, so I'm very interested. So we try to profile them in a way that, the last thing you want is for someone to come in and they just crap out, right? And I think whoever that comes into our industry, one templated response that I give them, one common question is like, where do you see the industry in the next 3 years? And then my answer is like, well, my friend, I've been around for 11 years. So I think it's a sufficiently good enough industry. But the other response that I give him is like, do not commit to this profession if you do not have a 5-year window. I think the element of patience in this industry is applicable, maybe more applicable than any other industry. So come in and make peace with time and really commit to make it work. This is not you might get lucky from a timing perspective and rebates and so forth, and you can consider yourself being pleasantly surprised, but don't bank on this. And I think that one thing that I immediately look forward, or I consider it as kind of a red flag for them more than I, is there's just hot rebates going on. I want to get into the action and I make some money. And I'm like, well, yeah, but you're not really being strategic, and that element of longevity needs to be part of your decision-making process. And if we don't see that, obviously we don't do it. And then once you get through that, I feel like the way a training course should be done, because think about it, right? You have people coming in that they have full-time jobs and part-time jobs. And you have to be very strategic with their time, because most likely they're going to be taking time off work. You have no idea how often people want to have afternoon and weekend training. I'm sure you get that a lot. But we get
especially as it pertains to energy advisors.
Yeah, and it kind of speaks to the original, where the original interest is coming, right? So the question is, hence the combination of the foundation and EA exam into one. And then just like, listen, like, I'm sorry, you have to allocate 1 week out of your life. And I think that's the second part, just amalgamating it too. And I think when it comes to the training, my preference, or what I think is like, the training needs to be strategic first and practical second. And what I mean by that is that it needs to be strategic enough to enable the energy advisors with the appropriate knowledge to pass the 2 exams. But at the same time, it needs to be practical for them to get some sense and some interactions of what it feels to do an audit. Hence the virtual tour of 2 energy assessment, end to end, from data collections to H2K modeling. But the practicality of being a good energy advisor at that point of the game, it's a lot less relevant than you knowing the appropriate knowledge for you to pass your 2 exams. Because once you pass your 2 exams, you will have plenty of opportunities to kind of gain that practicality as you go into the workforce. And I think that's my second part of the thesis. And the third part of the thesis is that what happens when the course comes to an end? And I feel like you need to have at least because from an SO perspective, it's funny, right? Because from an SO perspective, we're less about how much the course costs and what would be the revenue that will generate for us. And we're more about like, did we hire the first people, or have they passed their exams, and they can we actually establish that workforce that we can depend on to move forward? So I think that element of accountability is so important. So one thing that we do is that we have like study sessions after the course comes to an end, where we have touch points with these candidates, like once every 2 weeks or once every 3 weeks. We also, one thing that I've been recently doing, Olivier, is like I make everyone commit to book their foundation exam on Friday of the course. And that, believe it or not, just a tip for you guys, believe it or not, that actually increased their pass rate. Because they're like,
it's
guys,
fresh.
like no tippy-toeing around this thing. You are going to commit.
Yeah.
Like by Friday, I think 90% of the class usually commits to write their foundation exam 2 weeks after. And there's 2 study sessions. And I feel like if you don't have that accountability layer, and by the way, we do this stuff for free because you can't really charge for that stuff. But we have the motivation is there because we want them to join our work. But that study sessions and that accountability layer just makes sure that people are just more engaged. Because the minute they leave the course and they leave those fancy PowerPoint slides and all the stuff that they're listening to, they just go back to their day-to-day life. And what we've seen in the past is that people just spend money and they just disappear. Like, guys, what's going on? I mean, you spend like X amount of dollars. Please come back to the table and pass. So I think there's a little bit of a spoon feeding going on when it comes down to that. And that kind of comes to the exam. And once they pass their exam, he's like, we still need to give them the structure that serves their daily life. Because there's still that element of commitment. Yeah. They still want it to be a side gig. Who's going to pay for the equipment? I'm not interested in being an independent contractor either. I'd rather just have a full-time job. So I feel like there are so many hurdles that you need to be aware of to really, if your end result is a qualified, fully registered energy advisors, which is the preference of every SO out there. Like, I feel like there's so much more interactions and accountability and handholding that is required to get you to a rate to get you to a 60 to 70% pass rate. Like,
do you think that some people, especially those who have not looked at an examination for possibly 10, 20, 30 years, do you think there's an intimidation factor there?
Yeah, and we look for that. We looked at that when we profiling. Like having exposure to structured testing does help. Having you know what I mean? So we have certain preferences to university grads, engineering grads, or energy, or grads with grads in technology. I think part of it is a soft spot for me because when I graduated from school with a lot of debts, I wanted to get into the energy efficiency and there was no platform for me to go in. So the part of it is soft spot. So I really want to focus on that. And then the other part of it is that they just finished exams and I'm going to put them through another one. So studying and especially building science technical knowledge is not an alien factor to them. So it's very easy for them to forward through. And so that's one, but it still could work. I've had home inspectors who have failed the exam because they weren't tactical enough. You have to be tactical.
Yeah.
These questions are not designed to really test your knowledge. These questions are designed to test your knowledge from a very theoretical, and they're structured in a very tricky way. And you need to be aware of that. You need to be mindful of that to kind of navigate through it. And I think that definitely helps going through it. But I've also had people in PhD in microbiology, like a little bit older than the usual, and they've been also been able to pass. So there is a formula here that you can leverage. Does that make it easier? Totally makes it easier if you're a new grad with familiarity to structured testing. But I feel like you really need to go beyond the course to really have qualified, trained, registered energy advisors in the field. From profiling to walking them through the strategic part of passing the exam, to set up, to getting their commitment, to book the exams, and having checkpoints after the training to ensure that they're ready for their exams, and having a support layer when they fail, because it sucks when you fail. And I think that's more than ever. Like, here's an individual that committed to 5 days. He's studying with me all the time, and he has failed. I think more important than ever, you need to support those individuals and kind of get them back in the race. And I feel like that element of accountability, that skin in the game, it's still missing within our industry. And once that get incorporated in, and when everyone says your success is my, once you believe that your success is my success, and you're just kind of going beyond words and you're matching it against your actions, that's when you're gonna hit that 2,000 quota of registered energy advisors. That's the thing. Like that's why I'm so excited to teaming up with you guys and doing this thing, because there's a lot more much needed hand-holding that is currently missing from this industries, and hopefully we can kind of bring it all together.
I think you just touched on a few things though that make that, in my experience, looking at this now since 2018, that experience of going from entering to becoming a registered energy advisor. There's a couple things that make somebody more likely to be successful. I would say one for sure, if they have some knowledge of either building sciences, construction, or technical principles, either through an engineering degree or whatever it may be. I think that puts them in good stead. Number two, if they understand that, of course, these courses, and the percentages, the pass rates of people that have taken our training based versus not taking the training at all, or no training, or self-studying, are speak for themselves. So significantly, the success rates are significantly higher. But it is also important to study after the course. I mean, the journey doesn't end, shall we say, when the training ends. Unfortunately, there is some.
I always say for every 1 hour in the course, it's equivalent of 3 hours, like when you go off. So it's like
they definitely have to do some self-study. So that's really number two, is to do that self-study in preparation for writing the exam. And I think the third thing that makes people successful is to have that can-do attitude. I mean, I know a number of people personally that have failed the exam and then gone back to the drawing board, studied a bit more, and then passed. So I think those that are determined to do it will do it. It's that old adage: if you're determined, if you want it enough, you will do it. I think those three things, with those three conditions, people do well. And the other thing I think is interesting is I've seen now people get into the residential energy advising field with little to no experience. I mean, we've had some people get through the course that were one that was running a nursery, another one that was running a tree planting business. And so, this is very varied. And of course, that goes along with a lot of the mechanical engineers, or people that work for construction companies, or people that are already working for consulting groups, or for contractors that are already in the home reno space. So that's obviously familiar to them. But you can get there from, and I think you probably, Hamed, you've seen that too. You can get there from any walk of life if you have that determination. And of course, if you're going to set the time aside to take the course and do the self-study.
It's funny, if I had to generalize all this qualified, it's this, like, I look for soft skills more than hard skills, because if that determination is there, if that element of humanity is there, I can work pretty much with everything else. Because content is just content. It's just a matter of whether you understand what indoor air quality is and how to do heat loss calculation within an hour or within 3 days. Eventually, you're going to get it. It's just a matter of what is your mindset. And I agree with you 100%. I think, and it's hard. it's hard to kind of get down to it. It's actually getting to a point that we're actually doing like employee profile proficiency exams, where they basically gauge people's cognitive skills, and based on that we prioritize them, which kind of ties into the CIET course, right? We're actually gauging where they are in the big, and then we're using that as a priority to see which one is more well suited for this profession moving forward.
That's a great idea. We've started to do the same 2 or 3 years ago in terms of designing learning paths. So the idea is, of course, to assess where the learner is, and then make sure that we're placing them in the right situation, whether it's in energy management, whether it's in energy modeling, whatever the case may be, whether it's in recommissioning, whatever the case may be. You want to place the learner at a point of entry that makes sense for them. And obviously not every learner has the same point of entry. So yeah, I'm right along with what you're saying.
Exciting times.